Modern Queen Tales presents Disavowed. Part 1. The Fall of the Immaculate Agent. I never saw The Wire. That was the thought that kept my heart rate pinned at a dangerous 180 beats per minute as I vaulted over the white marble sculpture pedestal. For a woman who had spent the last 5 years of her life existing at the apex of global espionage, a status secured through relentless, almost obsessive dedication, missing a simple tripwire was an unforgivable, career-ending failure. Or, in my current situation, a life-ending one. At 25, I, Pauline Moreau, had achieved what veterans twice my age only dreamed of. I was French, meticulous, and yes, beautiful, a dangerous combination my superiors utilized to its full potential. My success wasn't due to luck or charm alone, it was the result of a calculated application of drive, effort, and skill. When I committed to a task, whether it was learning 3 new languages in 6 months or securing a kill shot under impossible pressure, the result was always definitive. I was the top tier, the Immaculate Agent. And now, the Immaculate Agent was sliding across a polished parquet floor in a ruined silk cocktail dress, the sound of splintering mahogany from the gallery owner's desk ringing in my ears. The mission had been textbook, an imported art gallery in Mayfair, England, owned by a man named Armand Herzog. Herzog's gallery was the suspected financial conduit for a certain nation with ties to destabilizing movements in the Mediterranean. My objective was to infiltrate Herzog's annual gala as a guest, locate his private office, and plant microcameras and acoustic devices. I had been flawless up to the final stage. The dress, a midnight blue, custom-tailored creation designed to look expensive but conceal a surprising amount of gear, had passed inspection. The cover story, heiress to a defunct Alsatian vineyard, was ironclad. The security bypass was smooth. I was inside Herzog's private office, a study in unnecessary opulence. Applying the final lens to the ceiling rose when the air suddenly thickened. The scent was subtle, metallic, and vaguely antiseptic. I registered it half a second too late. Ozone. I slammed the desk drawer shut, spinning around just as the security grid, the one I had confidently calculated was inactive, lit up the room in a sickly green hue. Someone hadn't just discovered the breach. They had been waiting for it. The door burst open. It was a man I recognized from an old dossier, a former KGB operative turned private military contractor, known only as the Carver. He carried a suppressed HK-45 with the professional stillness of a tax collector. My training instantly took over. Logic and panic were filtered out. Only action remained. Getting my primary weapon would have been too slow. Instead, I grabbed the closest heavy object, a heavy porcelain and gold inkwell, and hurled it at the light switch just above his shoulder. The lights shattered, plunging the office into near-total darkness, illuminated only by the pulsing green grid. The Carver fired 3 shots, 2 into the wall where I had been standing, 1 into the expensive Baccarat decanter on the sideboard. 3 shots, 3 misses. He was good, but I was fast. I used the fractional delay created by his necessary readjustment to launch myself through the office's window, which overlooked a small decorative balcony. The reinforced glass held for a moment, then gave way with a sickening crunch. The fall was only 2 stories, but the landing was rough, tearing the silk of my dress and scraping the skin of my left shoulder. I hit the cobbled alleyway behind the gallery, forcing myself up instantly. My radio, my lifeline, was useless. The secure channel was nothing but static, a harsh, buzzing refusal. I sprinted through the shadows, ditching the ruined heels as I ran, my mind already executing the next 10 steps. I made it 3 blocks before I stopped, sheltered in the narrow, damp space between 2 bins, and pulled out my secondary satellite phone. It was an encrypted, military-grade device impossible to jam or trace. I keyed in the emergency contact protocol. Protocol Chimera. The phone rang 3 times. Then the line clicked. "Identify yourself, Chimera," a cold, synthesized voice instructed. "Agent 723, Sigma. I am compromised, requesting immediate extraction under Protocol Omega." I recited the words like a prayer, my breath ragged. There was a moment of silence. My blood ran cold, far colder than the London night. "Agent 723, Sigma," the voice stated, devoid of inflection. "You are no longer listed in active status. Your credentials have been permanently revoked. Protocol Omega is rescinded. You are disavowed. You do not exist." Disavowed. The word hit me like a physical blow. It was the ultimate non-negotiable end. My superiors, the people for whom I had sacrificed everything, had cut the cord the moment I tripped the wire. No second chances, no extraction. I was a ghost, a loose end, and now a target of both the entity I was meant to investigate and the agency I had served. I crushed the satellite phone in my hand, the casing splintering beneath my grip. I stood alone in the dark alley, the high-end London gala, a muffled party of oblivious wealth behind me. Every safe house, every coded contact, every bank account tied to the agency was now a fatal trap. I had 5 minutes before the carver realized I hadn't bled out on the cobblestones. I needed shelter. I needed a base of operations. I needed something completely off the grid. Something so ridiculous, so un-Pauline, that no one in my former world would ever look there. I thought of the most chaotic, direct, and unpredictable man I knew. A man I hadn't seen in 7 years, but whose memory was a constant, irritating echo of freedom and brutal honesty. Ian, the stand-up comedian. I pulled the tattered remains of my dress together, hailing a black cab with a sudden, fierce determination. I had secured my agency spot in record time, and I would secure my survival even faster. The path to solving this wasn't through patience. It was through immediate, decisive action. Part 2. The Comedian and the Call Girl. Ian lived in a small, cluttered flat above a perpetually closed butcher shop in Battersea. It was a world away from Mayfair, a labyrinth of mismatched bricks, cheap pubs, and the constant dull roar of city life. The contrast was a physical jolt. I stood on his stoop at 3:17 a.m. My dress was a mess of rips and dried blood on the chiffon. My hair was undone, my makeup was running, and my bare feet were numb. I looked less like an heiress and more like a woman who had just lost a very messy argument with a hedge fund manager and a fire escape. I lifted my hand and knocked. 3 sharp, professional raps, a residual habit I couldn't shake. After a long pause, the interior light snapped on, bathing the dusty hall in a harsh yellow glow. The door opened, secured by a long chain. Ian's face appeared in the gap. He was exactly as I remembered him, only rougher around the edges. His usually messy dark hair was even messier, his eyes were still a startlingly direct green, and the stubble on his jaw looked less artistic and more forgotten. He wore a threadbare t-shirt and sports pants, and he squinted at me with the aggrieved confusion of a man woken from a deep, well-deserved sleep. "Look, mate, I don't know what you're selling, but the show was brutal tonight. I'm out of laughs and I'm out of shillings," he mumbled, his voice thick with sleep and that familiar, easygoing Irish lilt. Then he paused, looking me up and down. His green eyes widened slightly, taking in the shredded blue silk and my overall air of expensive distress. The confusion morphed into a very specific, knowing expression. Wait, he corrected himself, leaning closer to the gap. Wrong place, sweetheart. The, client you're looking for is next door. 3rd floor, Mr. Hannigan. He's an investment banker. Not a great guy, but he pays well, I hear. This is number 26. You want 28. He thought I was a call girl. The sheer audacity of the assumption, the directness of the suggestion, it was so entirely Ian that, despite the panic still thrumming beneath my ribs, a small, involuntary burst of pure, unadulterated exasperation escaped me. Ian, I said, my voice barely a whisper, strained by fear, exhaustion, and the sudden, ridiculous urge to laugh. He froze. His hand, which had been moving to close the door, stopped. His gaze snapped up from my torn skirt to my eyes. The sleepy, witty mask dropped. Pauline, he asked, the name a rusty sound in the silence. He unlatched the chain and pulled the door open fully. He looked stunned, his posture immediately shifting from relaxed annoyance to rigid concern. Merde! What happened? You look like you got mugged by a silk worm. Normally, I would have answered with a quip, but I was too tired, too disoriented by the abrupt crash landing into civilian life. I'm in a tight spot, I said, the agency-approved lie tasting like ash. A very tight spot, Ian. I need a couple of days. Just 2 days. Nowhere else to go. He stood aside immediately, the years of estrangement dissolving in the face of my obvious crisis. Don't be an idiot. Of course. Get in here. I stumbled past him into the small, warm flat. The space was everything I wasn't. Lived in, chaotic, comfortable. There were books stacked on every flat surface, a guitar leaning against the sofa, and the faint, comforting smell of burnt toast and old coffee. It was the smell of freedom, of a life uncomplicated by surveillance parameters and kill orders. Ian closed the door, locking it with 3 separate, heavy bolts, a paranoia I hadn't expected from him. He turned to me, his hands going to his hips. Tight spot, he repeated, studying the mud on my dress and the defensive way I was holding my shoulder. Pauline, I know your version of a tight spot. Your tight spot involves a presidential motorcade, a nuclear football, and a 3-piece suit. This looks personal. I shook my head firmly. It's a bad debt, a deal that went sour. They took my identification, my credit cards, everything. I had to run, nothing more, I swear. He eyed me, and I knew he didn't believe a word of it. Ian was a professional liar, a comedian, which meant his entire existence was built on observing the truth and twisting it until it became funny. He knew when someone was constructing a narrative, but he didn't press. He was too kind for that, despite his directness. Right, bad debt. Sure, come on, he sighed, running a hand through his already vertical hair. Let's get that off you before you ruin my one good rug. There's a spare t-shirt in the bathroom, and the shower is hot. We'll talk in the morning, when you've stopped looking like a very glamorous war casualty. Thank you, I managed, the 2 simple words feeling heavier than any classified confession. Don't thank me. You owe me 7 years of silence and a new rug if you bleed on this one. Now go. You're scaring the dust bunnies. I watched him turn away to fetch a towel. His ease, his total lack of artifice, was the diametric opposite of my entire existence. It was exactly what I needed. A sanctuary of sheer, unadulterated chaos that my former life would never recognize. Part 3. Reassessment and the immediate threat. The morning, or what passed for it, came early. I had slept for exactly 3 hours on Ian's ridiculously soft sofa, the deep, dreamless sleep of exhaustion. I woke up with the sunrise, my internal clock still set to high alert. Ian was already in the small, open-plan kitchen, frying eggs with the casual concentration of a man for whom this was the greatest challenge of his day. I emerged wearing one of his vast, gray t-shirts that smelled of detergent and ozone and a pair of ill-fitting tracksuit bottoms he'd found for me. My shoulder was bruised, but the cuts were superficial. "Morning, glamour girl," he greeted me without turning around. "Coffee's black. Bread is stale. Standard operating procedure." "Thank you, Ian. That's very kind." He flipped an egg expertly. "Nah, it's just self-preservation. I can't have a high-strung, multilingual woman in my flat who hasn't been adequately caffeinated. Sit." I sat at the tiny table. Ian slid a plate of eggs and toast in front of me. I analyzed the food instantly. Carbs, protein, low risk of toxins. Agency protocols were impossible to turn off. I ate quickly, efficiently, feeling strength return with every bite. "Okay, new plan," I said, dropping my fork. "I need a temporary phone, a laptop, and access to a power outlet that doesn't trace back to you." Ian leaned back, sipping his own coffee. "See, this is why I knew bad debt was a lie. People with bad debt don't talk about non-traceable power outlets. They talk about bail and broken kneecaps." "Ian, I said 2 days. If you help me, I will be gone. If you don't, I will still be gone, but you might find your television is missing a couple of components when I leave." He chuckled, but his eyes were serious. "You always did hate asking for help. Fine. The laptop is in the cupboard. Password is the date I died on stage. It's 02072018. Phone shop is 3 blocks down. Power. I run my extension cord to the butcher's common circuit in the hall. It's theft, but it's off the books. Will that satisfy your need for absolute deniability?" "Perfectly," I confirmed. This rapid deployment of resources was exactly what I needed. No begging, no long arguments, just quick, witty compliance. Within the hour, I was sitting on the floor, Ian's ancient laptop on my knees, plugged into the stolen power. I had procured a cheap, pay-as-you-go phone and was already creating a secure, disposable digital workspace. No room for revenge. My priority was survival, which meant understanding the why. My disavowal was unprecedented. An agent of my caliber was usually retired, not discarded mid-mission. I bypassed the laptop's security layers and began working through my disavowal protocol, the agency's own counter-protocol designed for agents who had gone rogue. It was a system I had written half of, so I knew its weak points intimately. Trying to hack the agency's main servers would have been a suicide mission. Instead, I focused on the human element, the clearance hierarchy that must have signed off on Protocol Chimera. There were 6 necessary signatures. I targeted the lowest-ranking signatory, an analyst named Rowena Croft. Rowena's digital footprint was minimal, but I knew her predilections. She loved expensive, obscure wines and terrible romance novels. I crafted a phishing email, a fake invitation to a private wine tasting, embedded with a single, highly sophisticated zero-day tracker designed to bounce through 3 dark web proxies. Within 90 seconds, the tracker was confirmed active. Rowena had opened the email. Immediate payback resolution. I was not interested in her life. I was interested in her communication logs from the last 12 hours. I accessed the tracker and used the open connection to deploy a packet sniffer, focused solely on her secure chat client history. I watched the data stream in, lines of encrypted text resolving into readable segments. The key message was, oddly enough, a code phrase I recognized from Herzog's gallery file. The Venus is secured. This phrase was used internally only when Herzog's gallery was confirmed to be a legitimate, ongoing operational front, receiving black funds, and that it was under surveillance by a different, deeper agency. I scrolled further. There it was, in a log from 3 hours before the gala started. Rowena Croft to Supervisor Delta. 723S is scheduled for 2200. Target confirmed active. Do we proceed with the ablation protocol? Supervisor Delta to Rowena Croft. Affirmative. Ablation authorized. The asset must not compromise Project Cerberus. Ablation protocol. It wasn't about compromise, it was about elimination. They hadn't disavowed me because I failed. They had sent me to the gallery with the intent of using me as a distraction, or perhaps a liability, to be removed so I wouldn't interfere with their real operation, Project Cerberus. I hadn't failed. I had been burned. The knowledge hit me with a cold, clear fury that sharpened my focus. My original organization was now my primary enemy. They had moved beyond the mere investigation of Herzog's gallery into something far more sensitive, and I was disposable. Ian watched me from the kitchen, slowly cleaning his coffee mug, pretending not to notice the intensity of my work. "Find what you were looking for?" he asked, his voice low. I closed the laptop, my fingers hovering over the kill switch. Yes, I found out the bad debt is a debt of honor. I was betrayed. I looked him straight in his direct, green eyes. "Ian, I'm not leaving in 2 days. This is going to take longer. If you tell anyone, or if you ask me too many questions, I can't protect you." He set the mug down gently. "You think I'm afraid of your tight spot, Pauline. I make a living telling strangers how pathetic my life is. I live on the truth and the lie. And you," he gestured at my tense posture, "you're a professional lie in search of the truth. Stay as long as you need. Just pay for the electricity and don't eat my muffins. They're expensive." The trust he offered, without conditions or fear, was disarming. It felt like the truest thing I had encountered in years. Part 4. The Dynamic of Opposites. Life in Ian's small apartment quickly settled into a bizarre routine. I was a caged predator, and he was the bemused zookeeper. My schedule was rigid. 4 a.m. analysis and research, 8 a.m. silent workout, yoga and precise, slow-motion self-defense drills in the living room, 11 a.m. contact with the outside world via carefully managed public Wi-Fi hotspots, and 20:00 p.m. system shutdown. Ian's schedule was a chaotic mess of late mornings, loud songwriting sessions on his acoustic guitar, and late-night gigs at various comedy clubs across London. We were diametrically opposed, yet the forced proximity created a strange, intense intimacy. Ian, direct and witty, was a verbal assault on my meticulous defenses. "You know, you could teach a class on how to eat a slice of toast with maximum tension," he commented one morning as I delicately cornered a crumb. "I am simply being efficient," I replied stiffly. "No, you're not. Efficiency is eating it whole and moving on. You're performing surgery on the carbohydrate. What are you expecting? A listening device in the butter?" He was irritatingly insightful. "Habit," I admitted grudgingly. "Habit is why I use the same 5 jokes every night. Your habit is why you have that lovely scar above your eyebrow, which, by the way, I still haven't asked about. Respect for the tight spot." His respect was the hardest part. He didn't pry, but his constant, gentle teasing eroded my walls faster than any interrogation technique. He saw the genuine, panicked woman beneath the operative, and he didn't judge her. One evening, I returned from an exhausting, low-level physical surveillance run, checking the movement patterns of Rowena Croft's security detail. My mood was dark. The operation was tighter than I'd anticipated. I walked in to find Ian on the sofa, strumming a blues progression and staring at his notepad. "Tough gig?" he asked, without looking up. "Worse. They've changed the parameters. I need to get closer to Herzog to understand Project Cerberus, but his security is impenetrable. It's like trying to get a reservation at the Sun." "Ah, Herzog, the art dealer. That's who you were trying to wire up, isn't it?" Ian finally looked at me, his guitar resting on his lap. I hesitated, but the need to strategize overcame my need for secrecy. Yes, he's the center of the conduit, but now he's just a lure. "Well, you know what I do when a room is too tight? I find the biggest guy, the quietest guy, or the most obvious guy, and I make him the punchline." I frowned. This is espionage, not comedy. It's not about finding a weak point for a laugh. It's exactly the same, Pauline. It's all misdirection. You focus the audience on the obvious, the big, shiny door, and they don't notice the escape route you built out of a perfectly timed cough and a limp. What's Herzog's obvious point of failure? "His wife," I said instantly. "Svetlana. She's a vapid socialite, obsessed with her charitable foundation, funds for orphaned animals. She's everywhere, always hosting, always visible." "Right, and you're the invisible woman now, the agent who doesn't exist. So stop looking for the high-security back door and go through the front like a normal person." Ian's logic, stripped of all agency procedure, was startlingly clear. I looked at him, recognizing the brilliance in his simple, direct approach. The agency would expect me to find a digital path or an armed entry. They would never expect me to use the most boring, civilian approach possible. "I need an invitation to Svetlana's next event," I concluded, tapping my fingers on the table. "No, you need a story," Ian corrected, shaking his head. "You can't just turn up. You're French, you're gorgeous, and you look expensive. You need a narrative that makes you instantly forgettable to everyone except Svetlana, who should see you as a mirror of her own vanity. You're not an heiress anymore. You're a disgraced celebrity publicist desperate for a comeback." He stood up, walking over to the coat rack, grabbing a cheap, floral scarf. He tossed it to me. "The lie has to be more interesting than the truth, Pauline. That's the rule of the stage. Get out there, and for God's sake, try to look like you're enjoying it." "You've forgotten how to smile." His final comment lingered. "You've forgotten how to smile." Had I? I realized the agency had taken more than just my credentials. They had stripped away the light, genuine parts of me. The following day, I used my refined hacking skills, the only tools I had left, to instantly fabricate a new persona. I gave myself the name Céleste Dubois, former publicist to an obscure European pop star, currently seeking new, high-profile clients in London. I focused my expertise for quick, superficial manipulation. No need for weeks' worth of background checks. I needed a convincing digital trail that could withstand a 5-minute Google search. Within hours, Céleste Dubois was a functioning, low-level social persona. My plan was set. I would use my new persona to infiltrate Svetlana's inner circle, gain access to Herzog's personal home network, and find the truth about Project Cerberus. Part 5, The Confrontation and the Quickening Heart. The first meeting with Svetlana was at a charity auction for rare breeds of dogs. It was a shallow, glittering display of wealth. The problem was, my fake invitation would never pass the specialized scanner the guard at the door was carrying. Ian, however, had once again thought of his own unique way to bypass this hurdle. He had given me a ride to the venue, parking far enough they'd never realized we came together. We then approached the building from different directions. He had refused to tell me what his plan was, so when I saw it in action, I couldn't stop myself from gawking at him, if only for a moment. He stood atop his foldable bench, in the middle of the road, as casually as if he had done it 1,000 times already. "All right, everyone, gather up! A little closer, guys. I don't bite. Not for free, anyway," he began, all smiles and confidence. "Now, I'm sure you're all thinking, what is this handsome and charismatic fellow doing on top of a stool in the middle of the street? Is he stupid? A beggar?" And the short answer is, yeah, kind of, but also. As he kept going, the people began to gather around him. Even the stern security guard holding the scanner kept trying to peek at the show without leaving his post, which gave me just the perfect window of opportunity to sneak in. Once inside, a sigh of both relief and exasperation escaped me. "My God, Ian," I thought, both amused and annoyed. "Just what am I going to do with you?" That answer would have to wait, as I had to begin my own performance. As Celeste Dubois, I was aggressive, flattering, and utterly unremarkable. I cornered Svetlana next to the champagne fountain. "Svetlana, darling, your ensemble is divine. It speaks to a generosity of spirit only matched by your foundation's mission." Svetlana, a woman whose face was stretched tighter than a bowstring, preened instantly. I spent the next 3 days moving quickly, using Ian's advice to navigate the social minefield. I secured an invitation to Herzog's private estate, where Svetlana was hosting a small, exclusive dinner party. My cover was flawless. I was in Herzog's mansion. The opulence was overwhelming, but I focused on my objective. While Svetlana was distracted by a minor celebrity's arrival, I slipped away. Herzog's private study was in the West Wing. I had 15 minutes before my absence would be noted. I bypassed the electronic lock with a homemade electromagnetic key card, a piece of tech I'd built from the innards of Ian's ancient digital radio and a disposable lighter battery. Instant, physical hack. Inside, the study was not opulent, it was sterile. Instead of art, the walls were covered in high-resolution aerial reconnaissance photos. The desk held 3 military-grade, heavily encrypted hard drives. I powered on the nearest computer and began running my decryption suite. It was a complex, multi-layered file, but my training dictated speed. Brute force would have been a mistake. I looked for human errors. The sloppy file names, the repeated character sequences. The file was titled CBA001, Final, Cerberus, I surmised. I found the opening in a linked photo file. Herzog had used his wife's birthday, 2510 October 25th, as the seed for the initial encryption layer, masked by a complex binary sequence. A sentimental mistake. I couldn't believe my eyes at first. Project Cerberus was not a financial operation, as I originally believed. It was a biological threat deployment. Herzog was coordinating the distribution of a fast-acting viral payload into European water systems designed to cause widespread economic panic. My agency, fearing international blowback if they went in hard, planned to let Herzog continue, then intercept the payload at the last minute and claim the victory, and they had eliminated me because I was an unpredictable element. I had too much autonomy, and if I had succeeded in my initial mission, Herzog would have been arrested before the payload was ready. I secured the data onto a tiny, inert micro SD card and killed the computer just as I heard a sound outside the study door. Not Svetlana, not Herzog. It was the Carver. He was waiting for me. This was a trap. My agency had fed him my assumed location. They wanted me eliminated here, on enemy turf, making it look like Herzog's security had taken me out. I didn't run. This was the moment for rapid payback. I was tired of running. I grabbed the heavy bronze letter opener from Herzog's desk. The door swung open. The carver saw me, a woman in a designer dress, poised to strike. He raised his suppressed pistol. I gave him no chance to fire. I launched myself forward, low and fast, slamming my entire body weight into his knee. The impact was calculated. It broke his stance and sent him staggering backward. The HK-45 discharged into the ceiling. I used the momentum, not stopping for a clean fight, but aiming for immediate, disabling strikes. I brought the pommel of the letter opener down hard, once, into the nerve bundle under his right armpit. The pain was excruciating. His gun hand went instantly numb. As the gun clattered onto the carpet, I pressed my advantage, using my entire body as a weapon. I disarmed him completely, then used the letter opener to pin his wrist to the floor. Not deeply, but enough to draw blood and make him scream. "Who gave the order for the ablation protocol?" I whispered, pressing the point just a millimeter deeper. He sputtered, "I don't know. Just Delta. They said you were a risk." "A risk to whom?" "Cerberus. The timeline. They needed the panic for their funding bill." Funding. It was always about the funding. My agency was engineering a crisis they could resolve to secure a massive government grant. I stood up, leaving him bleeding and incapacitated but alive. I was an operative, not a mercenary. My goal was information, not murder. I returned to the party, breathless but calm, and made my apologies to Svetlana. "Terrible traffic. I must rush, darling. Such a shame about the security. I swear I heard a terrible commotion in the West Wing." I fled the mansion, the mission accomplished, the data secured, and the physical threat neutralized, all within the span of 1 hour. Part 6. The New Path and the Resolution. I arrived back at Ian's apartment at 1 a.m., my cocktail dress now stained with something far worse than mud. The carver's blood. I never even bothered with the door bolts. I was trembling from the adrenaline crash of confronting my former life. Ian was waiting for me. He was sitting on the sofa, bathed in the soft glow of a reading lamp. His expression unreadable. "You're late," he said simply. "I had to tie up some loose ends. They were physical." I walked straight to the bathroom, stripping off the ruined dress. I tossed it into the tub and turned the shower on full blast, leaving the door open. I heard him walk to the bathroom door. "You were supposed to be the publicist, not the Terminator." "They tried to kill me, Ian," I said, stepping into the stream of scalding water. "My own people. They sent an assassin to Herzog's house, knowing Herzog would finish the job. It was a setup to eliminate me and cover up their own corruption." I heard a heavy sigh. "Tell me the truth, Pauline. All of it, now." I stepped out of the shower, wrapping myself in a towel, and walked back into the living room. I told him everything. The art gallery, the funding scheme, the wire, the disavowal, the ablation protocol, Project Cerberus, and the biological payload. I spoke quickly, efficiently, leaving nothing out. The raw truth spilled out of me, the agency's betrayal still a fresh, bitter wound. When I finished, I stood opposite him, expecting horror, maybe disgust. He only nodded slowly, running a hand over his face. "Right, so you're not just a spy. You're a world-saving, disavowed French super spy who just took down a Black Ops killer with a letter opener, presumably to stop a plague." "In essence, yes. And you need to contact someone trustworthy to expose this, without them knowing where you are." "I need to contact the one person above Supervisor Delta in the chain, but only through a secure channel that proves Herzog's attack is real, and that my data is genuine. It has to be immediate. A slow release will fail." Ian stood up, crossing the small space between us. He looked incredibly, profoundly angry on my behalf. "I know the man for the job," he said, his voice quiet and firm. "Not to expose it to the government, to expose it to the world." He walked to the bookshelf and pulled out a thick copy of the History of Stand-Up. Hidden inside was a sleek, military-grade satellite phone, identical to the one I had crushed days earlier. I stared at the phone. "Where did you get that?" "The agency isn't the only one that recruits people, Pauline. I was a distraction. I was the person they never looked at. I had a tight spot of my own, 7 years ago, and I had to lie my way out of it." He smiled a rare, cold smile. "I'm a stand-up comedian. I exist to make fun of power, and I know exactly who in the global media will run this story without asking for proof. They just want the scoop and the chaos. Instantaneous global exposure." My breath caught. He wasn't just a comedian. He was an information broker, operating in the highest tiers of civilian non-compliance, using his persona as a shield. The man I thought was my opposite was, in fact, my mirror. Both of us were masters of the perfect lie. "You're telling me I managed that you're also disavowed?" "I was never avowed," he corrected. "I was a ghost from the start, a perfect civilian cover. Now, give me that micro SD card." I handed him the tiny chip. He worked with a speed and confidence that matched my own. Within 10 minutes, the full, encrypted data, Herzog's operation, the agency's funding conspiracy, and my disavowal orders was bounced off 3 separate, publicly owned satellites and delivered simultaneously to a network of independent journalists around the globe. Resolution. The process took less than half an hour. Ian put the phone away, securing the book back on the shelf. He turned to me, the anger gone, replaced by a simple, raw honesty. "It's done," he said. "You're safe. They can't touch you without confirming the whole story is real. You are a global whistleblower now. You're a celebrity." "And you?" I asked, finally letting down my guard. "I'm just a guy who owes his friend a few favors." He reached out, gently touching the fresh bruise on my shoulder. "You should have told me the truth 7 years ago." "I couldn't," I whispered. "I didn't know who I was, except for my uniform." "Now you know who you are," he said, his green eyes locking onto mine with that intense, disarming directness. "You're the woman who showed up on my doorstep in a ruined dress, who I thought was looking for Mr. Hannigan, and who just saved London from a plague. You're not the perfect agent. You're just perfect." The tension that had existed between us for 7 years, the argument, the separation, the longing, resolved in a single, immediate wave. There was no need for a slow, arduous build-up, no long, drawn-out confession. We were both operatives, both masters of the mask. At that moment, the masks were gone, and the truth was the only thing that mattered. He stepped closer, and I leaned into him, burying my face in the soft cotton of his t-shirt, had ceased to be the Immaculate agent. I was just Pauline, safe in the chaos of a stand-up comedian's flat, finally free. "So," I murmured into his chest, feeling the tension finally drain away, "I still need a new dress." He laughed, a genuine warm sound that filled the small apartment. "I know a guy." The next morning, the headlines broke. Project Cerberus was exposed. Armand Herzog was arrested. And in Battersea, a Frenchwoman and an Irish comedian began to plan a life where the truth was funnier and far more honest than any of their old lies. The end.
If you enjoyed this quick escape, hit the subscribe button for new stories twice a week. Until then, I'll see you at the next flip of the pages.